When your HR manager tells you to smile more in meetings, remember that the smile of revenge is permanent. My name is Lauren Briggs. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I was just another brand strategist at Caldera Works, a struggling B2B tech company that had somehow managed to stay afloat despite its terminal lack of innovation. I say was because titles change when you're the one signing the paychecks. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 6 months ago, I sat across from Janelle Parker, our HR director, in what was supposed to be my performance review. The conference room felt particularly sterile that day, all glass and chrome with those uncomfortable chairs designed to keep meetings short. On the table between us sat a withered apple she'd pulled from her designer bag and placed in front of me like some twisted offering. "With the way the market is," she said, adjusting her tortoiseshell glasses, "you should be grateful you still have a desk." I remember staring at that apple brown spot spreading across its skin like a disease and thinking how perfectly it represented Caldera Works itself, once fresh and promising, now deteriorating from the inside out. "I've brought in $8 million in contracts this year," I replied, my voice steady despite the rage building behind my ribcage. "I salvaged the Mercurio project when Thomas abandoned it, and the Helix platform would be dead without my rebranding strategy." Janelle's smile never reached her eyes. "Lauren, your technical contributions are noted, but the leadership team feels you're not executive material." She flipped through my file with manicured fingers. "There are concerns about your demeanor in team calls. You come across as emotional when challenging ideas." Emotional, the corporate death sentence for any woman with an opinion. "Miles specifically mentioned the Delphi presentation," she continued, referencing our CEO. "He felt you were combative when the board suggested changes to your proposal." Combative, because I had evidence that their approach would alienate our core clients and said so. "We're putting Jennifer on the APAC expansion instead." Janelle concluded, Jennifer, whose greatest achievement was being Miles's golf buddy's daughter. "She has the right temperament." I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of injustice. "Anything else?" That's when she delivered the line that would change everything. "You want respect. Maybe try smiling more than challenging your boss." In this economy, gratitude goes further than ambition. I wish I could say I delivered some devastating retort that left her speechless. But real life isn't a movie. Instead, I did something better. I pressed the record button on my phone under the table. Sometimes silence is the best strategy when you're planning something bigger than a witty comeback. That night, I went home to my empty apartment, another casualty of putting career before personal life, and opened a bottle of Cabernet I'd been saving for a promotion that would never come. 3 glasses in, I found myself scrolling through LinkedIn, marinating in professional envy and resentment. That's when Veritas Frontier's job listing appeared in my feed. Senior Strategy Director, competitor to Caldera Works, but with triple the growth and a reputation for ruthlessness. They were everything we pretended to be: innovative, decisive, profitable. I applied without a cover letter. In the additional comments box, I wrote only, "Ask your board if they want to win." Then I closed my laptop and fell into a dreamless sleep, expecting nothing. 2 hours later, 2:17 a.m. according to my phone's harsh glow, an email arrived from Alexandra Price herself, Veritas CEO and notoriously cutthroat investor known for dismantling companies with surgical precision. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office. Bring coffee for yourself. I drink tea." I read it 7 times, wondering if the wine had impaired my vision. It hadn't. Sleep became impossible after that. I spent the remaining hours researching Veritas's market position, their competitive advantages over Caldera Works, and Alexandra Price's business philosophy. By morning, I had consumed enough caffeine to power a small village and rehearsed enough responses to sound confident without seeming desperate. Her office was nothing like I expected. No extravagant view or imposing desk. Just clean lines, practical furniture, and walls lined with books, not the decorative kind, but worn volumes with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. Alexandra herself wore no power suit or statement jewelry, just a simple black turtleneck and slacks that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Sit," she said without looking up from her tablet. No handshake, no small talk. I sat. After a full minute of silence, a power move I recognized but still found effective. She placed her tablet down and fixed me with eyes so intensely blue they seemed engineered rather than natural. Your resume is unremarkable, she began. Your company is failing. Your accomplishments, while solid, aren't exceptional enough to warrant this meeting. She leaned forward slightly. So tell me, Lauren Briggs, what's broken at Caldera Works? No questions about my 5-year plan. No behavioral scenarios or strength-weakness games. Just a direct line to the heart of the matter. So I told her, everything. The executive team that operated like a country club, the innovative ideas buried under bureaucracy, the favoritism that promoted mediocrity, the casual sexism disguised as culture fit, the financial hemorrhaging hidden behind flashy press releases. I spoke for 17 minutes straight without hesitation, laying bare every cancerous cell of the company that had just told me to be grateful for my existence. When I finished, Alexandra didn't speak immediately. She studied me with the calculated assessment of a chess player evaluating a potential queen sacrifice. Why should I hire you instead of just using this information to crush your employer? She finally asked. Because I can give you more than information, I replied. I can give you their future, the strategies they haven't implemented yet, the clients they're courting, the weaknesses only someone on the inside would recognize, and I can help you exploit all of it. She smiled, then not the practiced corporate smile I was accustomed to, but something more authentic and therefore more terrifying. I'm offering you triple your current salary, significant equity options, and a director-level position reporting directly to me, she said. Your job description is simple: crush Caldera Works from the inside out. I didn't hesitate. When do I start? You already have. This conversation was your first assignment. I gave my 2 weeks' notice that afternoon. Janelle seemed unsurprised, even pleased. Miles didn't even schedule an exit interview. They thought I was running away, licking my wounds after being passed over. They never considered I might be running towards something far more dangerous to them, at least. Alexandra assigned me a team of 3. Ezra Cohen, cybersecurity specialist with an ethically questionable past involving several banking systems. Tall, perpetually stubbled, with fingers that never stopped moving and eyes that seemed to process information faster than humanly possible. Marina Volkov, forensic accountant who'd spent 5 years hunting financial irregularities for a major consulting firm before deciding corporate watchdogs were too easily muzzled. She spoke 5 languages and could explain complex financial fraud in terms so simple they became damning. Leo Davenport, former content strategist fired from Caldera Works after reporting plagiarism in their flagship marketing campaign. He'd worked directly under Thomas, the creative director who took credit for my Mercurio rescue, and his institutional knowledge would prove invaluable. Together, we operated from a dedicated war room at Veritas walls covered in Caldera Works organizational charts, product roadmaps, and client relationships. For the first time in my career, I wasn't fighting to be heard. I was being asked to lead. Phase 1, I told my team on our first official day, is information gathering and strategic leaking. Caldera Works had been hyping their New Dawn initiative for months, a supposedly revolutionary platform overhaul that would position them as industry leaders. In reality, it was a hollow repackaging of existing features with a prettier interface, but the market didn't know that yet. Leo, draft a detailed analysis of the New Dawn architecture, its flaws, its recycled components, its unsustainable cost structure. Make it technical enough to be credible, but accessible enough to be damning. Leo grinned. And where would you like this analysis to mysteriously appear? TechCrunch would be too obvious, Marina suggested. What about Innovate Daily? They're respected but hungry enough for scoops to publish without excessive verification. Perfect. I agreed. Ezra, can you make it look like an internal leak rather than a competitive attack? He didn't even look up from his keyboard. Already creating a phantom email account with Caldera Works IP signatures, I'll route it through their own servers. Within a week. Innovate Daily published what appeared to be a whistleblower account from inside Caldera Works, complete with technical specifications suggesting New Dawn was not only unoriginal, but potentially over budget by millions. The article implied the initiative might be a smokescreen to distract from the previous quarter's disappointing numbers. Caldera Works stock dipped 3% that day. Not catastrophic, but enough to make investors nervous. One board member quietly sold $15,000 shares. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2, I announced, targets their client base. Caldera Works' largest client was Marston Freight, a logistics company that accounted for nearly 20% of their recurring revenue. Marston's CEO, Richard Kent, was famously risk-averse and pathologically opposed to uncertainty. We need to make Caldera Works look unstable without directly approaching Marston. I explained. Marina, analyze their last 3 quarterly reports and identify any inconsistencies or concerning trends. She delivered a 12-page report within 48 hours, highlighting subtle but worrying patterns: delayed product launches, increasing customer acquisition costs, and declining retention rates in key sectors, including logistics. Excellent. Now, Leo, transform this into 3 separate white papers focusing on industry reliability standards. Never mention Caldera Works directly, but ensure the failure patterns match their performance exactly. Leo crafted the papers under a fictitious research institute name, each one exploring a different aspect of B2B tech reliability with titles like Deadline Patterns as Predictors of Partnership Failure and The True Cost of Integration Inconsistency. We ensured these papers reached Marston's procurement team through legitimate channels, industry newsletters, LinkedIn posts from respected analysts, and a surprisingly receptive mid-level manager I'd met at a conference who had no idea he was part of a larger strategy. 2 weeks later, Veritas coincidentally reached out to Marston with a proposal emphasizing stability, consistent delivery, and transparent roadmaps. Everything the white papers suggested was crucial and everything Caldera Works struggled with. By the end of the month, Marston signed a 3-year contract with Veritas, effectively cutting Caldera Works' recurring revenue by 15% overnight. Phase 2 complete. Throughout this campaign, I maintained complete anonymity. As far as Caldera Works knew, I had simply left for a competitor. They had no reason to connect their mounting troubles to my departure, which made what happened next all the more surprising. Ethan Miller, a former colleague who had once saved me from layoffs by arguing for my value to the creative team, texted me on a Tuesday evening. "Are you behind this?" No context needed, he knew. I stared at those 3 words for a long time, memories flooding back of the times Ethan had stood up for me, the projects we'd rescued together, the late nights fueled by terrible office coffee and shared determination. For a moment, I felt a pang of something like guilt. I eventually replied with, "Take a week off, don't be in the building." He didn't respond, but his LinkedIn status changed to "on vacation" the next day. Some friendships run deeper than corporate loyalty. Phase 3, I told my team, is the kill shot. During my final days at Caldera Works, I had meticulously gathered evidence of the company's toxic culture, the recorded conversation with Janelle, emails about passed-over promotions despite superior performance, and most damaging of all, documentation of sexual harassment complaints that had been handled internally without investigation. Marina, compile everything into a legal brief. Ezra, ensure our digital footprints are untraceable. Leo, prepare a press release for after the fact, not before. I submitted the brief to Veritas' legal team with a simple note: acquisition leverage. 72 hours later, Veritas filed official paperwork for a hostile takeover of Caldera Works, citing mismanagement, toxic workplace culture, and failure to address employee concerns as factors affecting company valuation. Caldera Works stock plummeted 22% in a single day. The board, panicked by the sudden attack and fearing personal liability from the harassment documentation, agreed to emergency talks. That's how I found myself back in the same conference room where Janelle had told me to be grateful. Only now I sat on the opposite side of the table with Alexandra Price and Veritas's lead counsel. When Miles Carson and Janelle Parker walked in, their expressions shifted from professional neutrality to shock when they recognized me beside Alexandra. Miles recovered first, his sales training kicking in as he forced a smile. "Lauren, this is unexpected." Janelle didn't even attempt cordiality. "What is this about?" Alexandra nodded to me, ceding the floor with a subtle hand gesture. This was my moment, the culmination of months of strategy and years of underestimation. I placed my phone on the table and played the recording from my performance review. Janelle's voice filled the room. "You should be grateful." The color drained from her face. "I took your advice," I said, stopping the recording. "I found gratitude. I'm grateful you showed me exactly who not to become. I'm grateful you underestimated me so consistently that I became invisible enough to dismantle your company piece by piece. And now, I'm grateful to be the one who decides your professional fate." I slid the acquisition terms across the table, terms that included the immediate removal of current leadership, substantial restructuring, and a transition period during which I would oversee integration. "This isn't personal," Miles began, but I cut him off. "It is absolutely personal," I corrected him. "But it's also good business. Your company is failing because you value loyalty over competence, comfort over innovation, and golf buddies over qualified leaders. That ends today." The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Miles had resigned effective immediately with a significantly reduced golden parachute. Janelle was terminated for ethical violations with no severance. And I was named transition director with full authority to restructure what remained of Caldera Works under the Veritas umbrella. I didn't celebrate that night. No victory champagne or self-congratulatory speech. Just a quiet dinner alone, reflecting on the path that had led me here. Success, I realized, wasn't about proving others wrong as much as proving myself right about my abilities, right about my value, right about the changes needed to transform a toxic culture. The next morning, I walked into the Caldera Works office, my office now, and found Ethan waiting by my new desk. He didn't speak, just handed me a fresh apple and nodded once before returning to his department. Some loyalties transcend corporate warfare. That was 6 months ago. Today, the merged company operates under the Veritas name, with a culture that rewards performance over politics and innovation over inertia. Alexandra promoted me to Chief Strategy Officer last month, with a board seat pending approval. As for Janelle and Miles, last I heard, they were struggling to find positions comparable to what they lost. Turns out, forced resignation following ethical violations doesn't look great on a resume. The market is tough these days. They should be grateful for any desk they can get. So when your HR manager tells you to smile more in meetings, remember that the smile of revenge doesn't need to be visible to be effective. Sometimes justice isn't loud or immediate or even widely recognized. Sometimes it looks like a methodical dismantling of everything that tried to diminish you. And sometimes it looks like a fresh apple on your desk, replacing a rotten one from months ago, a small symbol of how completely things can change when underestimated people finally seize the opportunity to show their true worth. I picked up the apple Ethan had left, polished it against my sleeve, and took a satisfying bite. Sweet, crisp, perfect. Just like revenge served at room temperature. Life as Caldera Works' executioner wasn't my career goal when I graduated with honors from Northwestern's business program 12 years ago. Back then, I had visions of building something, not dismantling it. I imagined leading teams toward innovation, not orchestrating corporate extinction events, but adaptability, as they say, is the true measure of intelligence. The first weeks after the acquisition were chaotic by design. Alexandra had given me considerable latitude in the restructuring process, her only directive being efficiency without unnecessary cruelty. Make cuts that heal, not ones that merely wound, she told me. I want survivors who are relieved, not terrified. I began with a department-by-department evaluation that was notably absent during my tenure. Every team member received a standardized assessment measuring 3 things: technical competence, collaborative value, and innovative potential. Performance reviews from the old regime were deliberately ignored, too tainted by favoritism and politics to be useful. Jennifer, my APAC expansion replacement, was among the first casualties. Not out of vengeance, though I won't pretend the symmetry wasn't satisfying, but because her file revealed a pattern of delayed deliverables and client complaints carefully buried by Miles's intervention. When I called her into my office, I half expected denial or hostility. Instead, she looked almost relieved. "I knew this was coming," she admitted, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I was never qualified for that promotion." "Then why accept it?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Have you met my father?" Turning it down wasn't an option. I felt an unexpected twinge of compassion. Another woman caught in the machinery of men's expectations. "Your severance package includes 3 months' salary and career placement services," I told her. "And if you're interested, I know a marketing firm that might be better suited to your actual skills. The director owes me a favor." Her surprise was evident. "Why would you help me?" "Because dismantling a broken system isn't just about removing people, it's about putting them where they should have been all along." After she left, I stared at the organizational chart on my wall, red marks indicating completed evaluations. Halfway through, a pattern had emerged. Those most vocal about company loyalty were often those contributing least to its success. They clung to culture as a shield against performance expectations. By contrast, the quiet workers, those who kept their heads down and their opinions guarded, often showed the most untapped potential. Ethan had identified several during his years in middle management, but his promotion recommendations had been consistently overlooked. "These 5, I told Alexandra during our weekly update, pushing forward profiles of previously overlooked employees. They should form the core of our product development team." She raised an eyebrow. "None have management experience." Because management was a closed circle. But look at their project contributions, innovative solutions, consistent delivery, respected by peers. They're the hidden infrastructure that kept this place functioning despite its leadership. She studied the files, then nodded. "Promote them all, but pair each with a Veritas mentor until they find their footing." By the end of month 2, we had reduced overall headcount by 27% while actually increasing productive capacity. The remaining staff walked taller, spoke more freely in meetings, and submitted more project proposals in 6 weeks than Caldera Works had seen in the previous 6 months. Marina's financial analysis had uncovered another revelation under Miles's leadership. Nearly 40% of the company's resources were allocated to initiatives that generated less than 10% of revenue. The imbalance was staggering. He was chasing prestige projects, she explained, presenting color-coded spreadsheets that made the misallocation impossible to ignore. Partnerships with high-profile clients that looked impressive in annual reports but actually operated at a loss. "Redirect those resources," I instructed. "Focus on the sectors that generate sustainable growth, not vanity metrics." The board initially questioned this approach they'd grown accustomed to, dropping recognizable names at investor meetings, but the quarterly results silenced their objections. Profitability increased 18% within the first 3 months of reallocation. Not all transitions were smooth. Thomas, the creative director who'd built his reputation on others' work, organized a small resistance movement, spreading rumors that the acquisition was merely phase 1 of a plan to strip the company's assets and dissolve it entirely. I confronted him directly during a department meeting. "If our goal was dissolution, Thomas, we wouldn't be investing millions in infrastructure upgrades and talent development," I said, keeping my tone measured despite the anger simmering beneath. "But fear is a powerful motivator, isn't it? Especially when your position relies more on relationships than results." He resigned the following day, taking 3 loyal subordinates with him. They launched a consulting firm specializing in corporate culture preservation, a concept so ironic I almost admired the audacity. By month 4, the merged entity had stabilized enough for me to address the core issue that had enabled Caldera Works' dysfunction in the first place: human resources. Janelle's department had operated less as an employee resource and more as executive enforcement. Complaints disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. Advancement operated on undefined criteria that somehow always favored certain demographics. And policy enforcement varied wildly depending on the violator's relationship to leadership. I dismantled it completely. In its place, we established 3 separate functions: people operations handling recruitment, onboarding, and benefits, professional development managing training, advancement, and skill acquisition, and workplace advocacy addressing conflicts, policy violations, and employee concerns. Each reported to different executives, creating a system of checks and balances where previously there had been only unquestioned authority. This seems unnecessarily complex. One board member complained during my presentation. Concentrated power without accountability created the environment that devalued this company to the point of vulnerability. I replied, "We're not just changing names on an org chart, we're ensuring it never happens again." The transformation wasn't without personal cost. I worked 16-hour days, slept on my office couch more often than my bed, and temporarily suspended any semblance of social life. My mother left increasingly concerned voicemails about burnout and revenge obsession that I promised myself I'd address once things settled. They never quite did. As one phase of reconstruction completed, another began. Alexandra's expectations escalated with each success, the target moving forward with every goal achieved. I recognized the pattern from my own ambition, the perpetual state of almost there that kept driving me forward. One Tuesday evening, as I reviewed candidate profiles for the restructured HR divisions, Ethan appeared in my doorway with 2 cups of the same terrible office coffee we'd sustained ourselves with years ago. "Your assistant left 3 hours ago," he said, placing 1 cup on my desk and dropping into the chair opposite. "The cleaning crew is giving you dirty looks." I rubbed my eyes, suddenly aware of how dry they'd become from staring at screens. "I'm almost finished with these evaluations," said every workaholic 5 minutes before midnight. He took a sip of his coffee and grimaced. "Still tastes like anxious ambition and broken dreams." I laughed despite myself. "That's oddly poetic for a data analyst. I contain multitudes." His expression turned serious. "Lauren, you've been running this place like someone's chasing you for months. The company is stable. The transition is working. Maybe it's time to transition yourself a bit." I gestured to the stack of folders on my desk. "There's still so much." "There will always be so much," he interrupted gently. "That's how corporate America sustains itself, by convincing brilliant people their worth depends on their willingness to sacrifice everything else." The words hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Wasn't that exactly what I'd resented about Caldera Works' culture? The implied equation of devotion with depleted personal lives. "I don't know how to slow down," I admitted. "Not now, not after everything it took to get here." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Start small. Leave by 7 tonight. Have an actual breakfast tomorrow that doesn't come in a protein bar wrapper. Call your mother back." I narrowed my eyes. "How did you know about my mother?" "She called the office line. Apparently, you've been screening her calls like a guilty teenager." His impression of my mother's Wisconsin accent was disturbingly accurate. "I promised her you were alive, just temporarily consumed by corporate restructuring." "And what did she say to that?" "That no job is worth becoming a stranger to your family, and that she raised you better than to use work as an excuse to avoid Christmas dinner." He stood, adjusting his glasses with a familiar gesture that reminded me of easier times. For what it's worth, I agree with her. After he left, I stared at the half-empty coffee cup, its contents already cooling to that particularly unappetizing lukewarm state that perfectly symbolized delayed gratification. How many moments had I let cool while chasing the next hot opportunity? I closed the candidate files, shut down my computer, and left the office by 8:15, not quite 7:00, but progress nonetheless. On the drive home, I called my mother. She answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "So the prodigal daughter remembers she has a family," she said, no real bite behind the words. "I've been busy saving the world from toxic corporate culture," I replied, the familiar rhythm of our banter surprisingly comforting. The world will still need saving tomorrow. Your pot roast, however, is getting cold right now. I made a detour to her suburban home, where she waited with the promised pot roast and absolutely no questions about work, a restraint so uncharacteristic it could only be deliberate. Instead, we talked about her garden, my cousin's new baby, and the neighborhood gossip I'd missed while orchestrating corporate warfare. It was the first night in months I didn't dream about spreadsheets or organizational charts. The next morning, I arrived at the office with a strange sense of clarity. The previous day's conversation with Ethan had triggered a realization that, in my quest to dismantle an unhealthy system, I'd inadvertently adopted some of its worst aspects: the all-consuming dedication, the identity defined by professional achievement, the relationship sacrificed to ambition. I called an all-hands meeting, not the carefully orchestrated presentations we'd been doing, but an open forum where questions weren't screened and answers weren't rehearsed. For the past 4 months, I began looking out at faces that had transformed from fearful to cautiously optimistic under my leadership. We've been focused on what this company does wrong and how to fix it. Today, I want to talk about what we want to do right. I outlined a vision beyond mere survival or integration, a company culture built on transparent expectations, celebrated achievements, and balance between professional ambition and personal fulfillment. The measure of our success won't just be market share or profit margins, I continued. It will be whether we can create an environment where talent thrives without requiring the sacrifice of everything else that matters. From the back of the room, Ezra called out, "Does this mean we get actual weekends now?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, but I noticed the hopeful undertone. "It means we're acknowledging that burnout isn't a badge of honor," I replied. "It means we're rejecting the false choice between career success and personal well-being. And yes, Ezra, it means respecting weekends as actual time off rather than bonus work days." The policy changes that followed were both subtle and profound. Meeting-free Fridays, 4-week sabbaticals for every 3 years of employment, flexible work arrangements that focused on results rather than desk time, mandatory vacation usage with no contact rules for leadership. Alexandra was skeptical initially. "This sounds idealistic," she said during our strategy session. "Admirable, but potentially costly." "So is turnover," I countered. "So is diminished creativity from exhaustion. So is the institutional knowledge we lose when people burn out and leave. We're not reducing expectations, we're creating sustainable conditions for meeting them." She studied me with that penetrating gaze that had become familiar over the months. "This isn't just about the company, is it?" I met her eyes. "The best policy changes rarely are." She nodded slowly. "Implement it, but I want quarterly assessments on productivity metrics and retention rates. If it works, we roll it out company-wide." It worked. Not perfectly, not immediately, but steadily and measurably. Productivity actually increased as people returned from weekends refreshed rather than resentful. Creative solutions emerged more frequently in an environment where failure wasn't catastrophic and success wasn't the only acceptable outcome. 6 months after the acquisition, Alexandra called me into her office, the same spare, functional space where I'd first laid bare Caldera Works' weaknesses. "The board has reviewed the integration results," she said without preamble. "They're impressed. I'm promoting you to Chief Strategy Officer, effective immediately." I blinked, momentarily speechless. "That's unexpected." "Is it? You've demonstrated strategic thinking at every turn. You've rebuilt a failing company into a productive division. You've implemented culture changes that are showing measurable benefits." "I've had significant support," I reminded her. "Marina, Ezra, Leo, the team we assembled." "Yes, and recognizing talent is another leadership quality." She slid a document across her desk. "Your new compensation package. The board seat is pending approval, but I don't anticipate resistance." I glanced at the figures numbers that would have seemed impossible a year ago, then back at Alexandra. "Why did you answer my email that night, the 3 a.m. application with no cover letter?" She almost smiled. "Because anyone who applies for a director position at 2 a.m. either has terrible judgment or nothing left to lose. Either way, I was curious. And now I know it was the latter. You had nothing left to lose because they'd already taken it: your dignity, your ambition, your belief in meritocracy. That makes for a dangerous opponent, but a valuable ally. On my way out, I passed Marina in the hallway, her arms full of financial reports. "Congratulations, Chief Strategy Officer," she said, no surprise in her voice. "Does this mean we get bigger offices now?" News traveled fast. Apparently. "It means we get to expand the restructuring model to other acquisitions," I replied. Alexandra has her eye on 3 more companies with similar dysfunctional patterns. Marina's eyes lit up with professional excitement. "Corporate rescue as a business strategy. Brilliant." "Not rescue," I corrected. "Reclamation. We're not saving these companies, we're reclaiming the potential they've wasted through poor leadership." That evening, as I cleared out my transition director office for the larger CSO suite, I found a small box on my desk with no card. Inside was a silver nameplate reading, "Lauren Briggs, Corporate Extinction Event Specialist." Ethan's handiwork, undoubtedly. I placed it on my new desk the next morning. A reminder that destruction sometimes precedes necessary creation. That gratitude is not incompatible with ambition. That smiling more in meetings might be good advice after all, especially when you're the one running them. 6 months later, we acquired the company Janelle had moved to after her termination. I personally conducted her exit interview. "You should be grateful," I told her as she gathered her personal items, "that I believe in professional courtesy more than you ever did." Her severance package was fair, her reference neutral rather than damning, not because she deserved it, but because I refused to become what I had fought against. Justice, I've learned, isn't always about matching cruelty with cruelty. Sometimes it's about creating a world where that cruelty becomes obsolete, where "be grateful" transforms from a weapon of diminishment into a genuine recognition of mutual value. I am grateful now. Grateful for the withered apple that showed me exactly how rotten a company culture could become. Grateful for the underestimation that granted me invisibility until I chose to be seen. Grateful even for Janelle and Miles, whose failures as leaders taught me precisely what not to become. But mostly, I'm grateful for the revelation that changing a system doesn't require becoming its worst elements. That revenge, properly executed, isn't about destruction at all. It's about building something so much better that the original insult becomes irrelevant. The sharpest response to "be grateful you still have a desk" isn't taking someone else's desk. It's building an entirely new table and deciding who gets invited to sit at it. My name is Lauren Briggs. I'm 34 years old, and I'm no longer just another brand strategist at a struggling B2B tech company. I'm the architect of its transformation. And that is something truly worth being grateful for. There's a particular satisfaction in watching something you've built flourish beyond your original vision. As Chief Strategy Officer with a newly confirmed board seat, I had expected to spend my time focused on expansion, acquisition targets, and market positioning. What I hadn't anticipated was becoming the reluctant spokesperson for corporate culture reformation. It started with a profile in Harvard Business Review, "The Caldera Works Revolution: How One Acquisition Redefined Workplace Culture." The article detailed our restructuring process, the implementation of balanced work policies, and the resulting improvements in both productivity and employee retention. It was factual, measured, and completely devoid of the personal vendetta that had initially fueled my involvement. The response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with interview requests from business publications, speaking invitations from industry conferences, and most surprisingly, messages from employees at other companies describing workplace conditions painfully similar to what I'd experienced at Caldera Works. "I'm told to be grateful for my job daily," wrote one woman, a marketing director at a financial services firm. Meanwhile, my male colleague with half my experience was promoted above me because he presents more authoritatively in meetings. Another message read, "Our HR director uses the exact same language, smiling more, being less challenging in discussions." Reading your story was like seeing my daily reality in print. These messages continued arriving, dozens becoming hundreds. each one a variation on the same theme: qualified professionals being undermined by toxic leadership hiding behind the shield of corporate culture. Alexandra called me into her office after the third major publication requested an interview. "This isn't what we anticipated," she said, gesturing to the stack of media inquiries on her desk. "But it presents an interesting opportunity." I raised an eyebrow. "For publicity?" "For leadership," she corrected. "There's clearly a demand for what you might call corporate rehabilitation. Companies suffering from the same dysfunctions as Caldera Works, but without the benefit of acquisition to force change." "Consulting," I surmised. "More than consulting, transformation." She leaned forward, that familiar intensity in her eyes. "I'm proposing a new division under your direction, Veritas Reformation. Not just advising companies on better practices, but implementing systemic changes with measurable results." The idea was compelling, scaling what we'd accomplished beyond our own walls. But I hesitated, remembering the all-consuming nature of the original transformation project. "I've just found some semblance of balance," I reminded her. "Taking this on would mean building a team, not doing it all yourself." She interrupted. "The Lauren who dismantled Caldera Works alone isn't the same Lauren I want leading this initiative. I want the one who learned that sustainable change requires sustainable practices." Her perception was uncomfortably accurate. The lessons I'd implemented for others had been hard-won through my own mistakes. "I'll consider it," I promised. That evening, I called my mother a regular occurrence now rather than a guilt-driven rarity. "They want me to lead a new division," I explained after exchanging the usual pleasantries. "Corporate culture transformation on a consulting basis. Helping other companies not be awful to their employees," she clarified in her practical way. "Essentially, yes." "Well, that sounds worthwhile. Are you worried about taking it on?" I sighed, sinking deeper into my couch. "I'm worried about falling back into old patterns: the 16-hour days, the single-minded focus, the personal sacrifice." I could picture her thoughtful expression, the slight furrow between her brows that appeared when she was considering a problem. "Seems to me the difference is perspective. Before, you were trying to prove something to yourself, to them, to the world. What would you be trying to prove now?" The question lingered as we moved on to other topics: her garden club drama, my brother's new home renovation, the neighborhood dog that kept digging up her prized tulips. But after we hung up, I returned to it repeatedly. What would I be trying to prove now? Not my value. Veritas had recognized that with promotions, compensation, and responsibility. Not my capability. The successful transformation spoke for itself. Not even the viability of the approach. The metrics confirmed what we'd already known intuitively about healthy workplace cultures. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps this wasn't about proving anything, but about creating something, multiplying the impact of what we'd learned, helping others avoid the painful lessons that had brought me here. I called Ethan, now heading our data analytics department, and invited him to dinner, not at some expensive restaurant designed for business discussions, but at a small Ethiopian place we'd discovered during a conference years ago. "This is about the Reformation proposal," he guessed as we scooped up spicy lentils with torn pieces of injera bread. "News travels fast." He shrugged. Alexandra asked my opinion about data tracking for cultural transformation metrics. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. "And what did you tell her?" "That quantifying cultural change is challenging, but not impossible. That we'd need to establish new benchmarks beyond traditional performance indicators." He set down his bread. "But that's not why you asked me here." I smiled slightly. 12 years of friendship had made him frustratingly perceptive. "I'm concerned about balance," I admitted. "About starting something new when we've just stabilized what we have." "You're concerned about yourself, not the company," he corrected gently. "You're worried you'll become consumed again." "Is that unreasonable?" "No. But it's manageable." He leaned back, studying me with the same analytical attention he usually reserved for complex datasets. "The difference is awareness. You recognize the pattern now. You've implemented systems to prevent it, both personally and professionally. Systems can be overridden. True, which is why you need people who will call you on it when you try. He grinned. Fortunately, you've surrounded yourself with people who aren't afraid to tell you when you're being an idiot. I laughed, despite myself. Is that what you'd be doing in this new division, professional idiot caller? Among other things. His expression turned serious. Lauren, you transformed Caldera Works because you understood exactly what was broken. You have a unique perspective that combines insider knowledge with objective distance. If you can scale that, teach others to recognize and repair toxic patterns, imagine the impact. The conversation continued late into the evening, moving from professional considerations to personal reflections and back again. By the time we parted, I had not quite decided but was leaning strongly toward acceptance. The following week, I presented Alexandra with a conditional proposal I would lead Veritas Reformation with a carefully structured team and explicit boundaries around my own involvement. 3 days per week on Reformation projects, 2 dedicated to my existing CSO responsibilities. I stipulated a core team of specialists rather than a revolving door of consultants, and most importantly, success metrics that value sustainable change over quick fixes. She accepted without hesitation, as if she'd anticipated every condition. Perhaps she had. We launched Veritas Reformation with a small but potent team. Marina handled financial restructuring, implementing transparent compensation systems and equitable advancement metrics. Ezra developed technological solutions for anonymous feedback and accountability tracking. Leo created communication frameworks that encouraged collaborative innovation rather than top-down directives. And most surprisingly, Jennifer, yes, the same Jennifer who had taken my promotion, joined as our client liaison after completing an MBA focused on organizational psychology. Her experience as both beneficiary and victim of a broken system provided valuable perspective. Our first client was Meridian Technologies, a mid-sized firm suffering from alarming turnover rates and declining innovation despite competitive salaries. Their CEO, Victor Hargrove, had reached out after reading the HBR article, his initial skepticism evident in every carefully worded email. "We don't need a complete overhaul," he insisted during our first meeting, defensive posture betraying his discomfort. "Just some fine-tuning of our retention strategies." I smiled, remembering Miles's similar resistance to acknowledging fundamental problems. Before we discuss solutions, we need to understand the actual issues, not just their symptoms. Our diagnostic process was thorough anonymous employee surveys, department audits, leadership assessments, and financial analysis. The results painted a familiar picture: advancement based on tenure rather than merit, innovative ideas buried under bureaucratic approval processes, and a leadership team increasingly disconnected from frontline realities. When I presented our findings to Victor, I expected defensiveness. Instead, he looked genuinely shaken. "I had no idea it had gotten this bad," he admitted, running a hand through his graying hair. "When did we become this?" "Gradually," I replied, "and then suddenly. That's how culture decay usually works. Small compromises that accumulate until the entire foundation is unstable." The transformation plan we developed was comprehensive but implemented in manageable phases: leadership accountability systems first, followed by promotion criteria, overhauls, communication restructuring, and finally, work-life balance initiatives. 6 months later, Meridian's turnover had decreased by 32%. Innovation submissions had increased by 47%. And employee satisfaction scores showed significant improvement across all departments. Victor invited me to address their all-hands meeting, an opportunity I initially hesitated to accept. Public speaking had never been my strength, and my role had always been more strategic than inspirational. "They want to hear from the architect," he insisted, "the person who saw what was possible when we couldn't." So I stood before 300 Meridian employees, no prepared speech, just honest reflection on what we'd accomplished together. "Transformation isn't about destroying what exists," I told them. "It's about excavating what's been buried: the talent, the creativity, the collaboration that thrives when not smothered by unnecessary hierarchy or inequitable practices." A young woman in the front row raised her hand during the Q&A session. "Before these changes, I was ready to quit," she said. voice slightly trembling. I'd been passed over twice despite exceeding every performance metric. Now I'm leading the project I proposed last year, the one that was deemed too ambitious for someone at my level. Her story resonated with something deep within me, the alternate version of my own journey. One where transformation came through evolution rather than extinction. As we expanded to additional clients, patterns emerged across industries and company sizes. The same fundamental dysfunctions manifested in different corporate languages, but produced identical results: demoralized talent, stifled innovation, and ultimately, vulnerable market positions. By our second year, Veritas Reformation had worked with 17 companies, each transformation adding to our knowledge base and refining our methodologies. We published case studies, developed training programs, and even created a certification process for internal change agents who could maintain momentum after our direct involvement ended. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying, watching companies transform from within, seeing talented individuals finally recognized and empowered, hearing stories of professional fulfillment replacing resignation and resentment. One evening, as I was reviewing client reports in my home office strictly within my designated work hours, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Lauren Briggs?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Rebecca Liu. I'm the new HR director at Tensor Systems." The name triggered immediate recognition. Tensor was where Janelle had landed after her brief, unsuccessful stint following Caldera Works. "What can I do for you, Rebecca?" "I've inherited quite a situation here," she said, a note of wry understatement in her voice. "Our previous director implemented policies that have created significant cultural challenges." "I'm familiar with her work," I replied neutrally. "I suspected you might be." A pause. "We need help, Ms. Briggs. The kind of transformation your team specializes in." The irony wasn't lost on me, being called to repair the damage Janelle had caused elsewhere, continuing the cycle of dismantling her toxic approach to workplace culture. "Send me your company information," I said. "We'll need to conduct our standard assessment before determining if we're the right fit." After the call, I sat in contemplative silence. The universe, it seemed, had a particular sense of humor, or perhaps justice, bringing Janelle's influence back into my professional orbit just as Veritas Reformation had hit its stride. I could have declined the project, referred them to another consulting firm, avoided the complex emotions that would inevitably surface when confronting another environment shaped by the same person who had once diminished me. It would have been the easier choice. Instead, I added Tensor to our client pipeline and assigned our most experienced team to the assessment phase. Not out of vengeance or vindication, but because their employees deserved better, deserved the same transformation opportunity that had changed everything for me and for so many others since. 3 years after that fateful performance review with the withered apple, I found myself addressing a conference of business leaders on sustainable culture as competitive advantage. The audience included CEOs, HR directors, and change management specialists from across the country, all seeking insights into the methodology that had produced such consistent results. "The fundamental mistake most companies make," I explained, "is treating culture as a marketing tool rather than an operational framework. Your ping-pong tables and casual Fridays mean nothing if advancement is still based on favoritism rather than contribution. Your unlimited vacation policy is worthless if using it marks you as uncommitted." From the back of the room, a familiar voice called out during the Q&A, "What about companies that claim they can't afford culture change in this economy?" I squinted against the stage lights, making out Miles Carson's face in the audience, older, grayer, but unmistakable. Not hostile, just genuinely curious. "The question assumes culture change is an expense rather than an investment," I replied evenly. "But let me ask you this. What's the cost of losing your most innovative talent? What's the price of maintaining systems that elevate mediocrity because it's comfortable? What's the financial impact of decisions made to protect egos rather than serve market needs?" I paused, meeting his gaze directly. "In this economy, in any economy, you can't afford not to change." He nodded slowly. A gesture that might have been acknowledgement, might have been respect, or might have simply been muscle memory from years of conference attendance. It didn't particularly matter. His presence was no longer a trigger, but merely a data point in a much larger narrative. After the presentation, Alexandra joined me for coffee in the hotel lobby. Her presence at the conference both surprising and oddly fitting. Impressive turnout, she noted, surveying the networking crowd with her characteristic analytical gaze. Reformation has exceeded every projection we established. The demand was always there, I replied. Companies just didn't know what to call their dysfunction before we gave it a name and a solution. She studied me over the rim of her cup. And you, has this been what you expected? I considered the question carefully. It's been healing in ways I didn't anticipate. Seeing transformation happen without destruction first, building rather than dismantling. Regrets about Caldera Works? No, I said without hesitation. That transformation needed to be what it was, complete and uncompromising. But I'm grateful it's not the only model we use now. She nodded, satisfied with my response in that enigmatic way she had of accepting answers without necessarily agreeing with them. The board is discussing expansion, she informed me. International offices, beginning with London and Singapore. They want you to oversee the strategic direction. Another opportunity. Another evolution of what had begun with a single withered apple and the words, "Be grateful." The symmetry was almost poetic. I'll need to establish clear parameters, I began, already mentally drafting the necessary boundaries and team structures. Alexandra actually smiled, a rare enough occurrence to be noteworthy. I expected nothing less. Your balance has become as much a part of your reputation as your effectiveness. Later that evening, I called Ethan from my hotel room. Our weekly check-in now a comfortable ritual, regardless of travel schedules or time zones. How was the conference, he asked after we'd exchanged updates. Productive. Miles was there. A pause. How did that feel? Surprisingly insignificant, I admitted. Like running into a former teacher whose opinion once seemed so important, but now just feels distant. Growth, he diagnosed, satisfaction evident in his tone. Remember when just hearing his name would send you into strategic planning mode? I laughed, recognizing the truth in his observation. The board's discussing international expansion for Reformation. And I'm considering it, with appropriate boundaries and team structures, of course. Of course, he echoed, the smile evident in his voice. The Lauren Briggs method, ambitious expansion with sustainable execution. After we hung up, I stood by the hotel window, watching the city lights below. From 15 floors up, individual buildings blended into patterns of illumination systems rather than components, much like the organizational structures we work to transform. My phone chimed with an email notification. Tensor Systems had completed their initial assessment. The results were familiar. The same toxic patterns repeated in new environments. The same unnecessary barriers to talent and innovation. The same opportunities for meaningful change. Another company to transform. Another culture to rehabilitate. Another opportunity to replace "be grateful you have a desk" with "we're grateful you're at the table." I typed a quick response confirming our team's availability to begin the transformation process, then set my phone aside and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new growth, both for the companies we served and for myself. That night, I dreamt not of withered apples or corporate takedowns, but of tables large, welcoming tables with seats for everyone who deserved to be there, regardless of title or tenure or technical pedigree. Tables where ideas flowed freely and contribution determined influence rather than the reverse. In the morning, I woke with renewed clarity about the work ahead, not just the specific transformations at specific companies, but the larger cultural shift we were gradually, persistently creating across the business landscape. Change that heals rather than wounds. Systems that elevate rather than diminish. Cultures that recognize gratitude as a mutual exchange rather than a one-way expectation. My name is Lauren Briggs. I'm 37 years old now, and I'm no longer defined by what I dismantled, but by what I've helped build in its place. The smile of revenge may be permanent, but I've discovered something more satisfying. The smile of transformation of watching people thrive in environments designed for their success rather than their submission. That smile isn't about revenge at all. It's about redemption.